नमस्कार दोस्तों, मैनिस्कस मास्टर वीडियो में आप सभी का स्वागत है। जैसा कि आप लोगों को पता है कि इस मास्टर वीडियो सीरीज में हम लोगों ने डिफरेंट शोल्डर का
Hello everyone, and I am today discussing some history portion of the question. So some kind of the history portion. Okay. So question number 1 is regarding regardless of the distance in time, where were lot of similarity between Lord Curzon and Jawaharlal Nehru. So we need to tell about the Lord Curzon and Jawaharlal Nehru and similarities in between of them. Okay, so what kind of the similarity between the Lord Curzon and Jawaharlal Nehru? So first of all, Lord Curzon time was from 1899 to 1905 AD. Okay, and this time was while Nehru ka time kya hai, pre and post independence. This time is Jawaharlal Nehru. Okay, so condition against them were coarse, different than two. The attitude shows many similarities in the nature and method. First is administration. So what about the administration? Both were firm administrator. So first similarity is the both were firm administrator. Okay, both were firm administrator, and Curzon worked for the interest of British India while Nehru for the interest of India. So Lord Curzon and Curzon was in that time Curzon was working for the British India, and Jawaharlal Nehru, he was working for the core India. Okay, and Nehru for the interest of India, and both of them was they were working efficiently. So second similarity is about the working condition. Third is they were able to work in spite of having differences with system. For example, Curzon did not fully agree with parliamentary and viceroy and council matter. So Curzon was in a parliamentary matter. He was very prominent for the parliamentary matters. And second thing was he was a viceroy in council. He was the viceroy in council about the Lord Curzon. But Nehru, on the other hand, had differences with Congress over the issue like socialism, international stand policy, objective, and constitutional reform. So Nehru has its own foreign policy. So Nehru was that time very prominent person. He has the own foreign policy. Okay, foreign policy, and he has a different perspective about the constitution. He has a different perspective about the constitution, and his policy objective was different about that. Okay, and he was always reformer in the constitution, so he did multiple reforms. So Curzon reform जो थे मतलब if I'm talking about the Lord Curzon, okay, so Curzon was basically wanted to do reform in administrative policy and judicial policy okay, so he wanted to do the administrative reform and the judicial reform, and Nehru during the interim government also tried to do it. So Nehru was in the interim government, and he also tried to reform in administrative and other system. And now both Curzon and Nehru make some structural changes. So both of them was doing the structural changes of that time. Okay, structural changes, and like Curzon के जो reform थे, now I am discussing about the reform by the Lord Curzon. So what kind of the Curzon did? First is police reform. Okay, police reform was during the Lord Curzon time. Second was judicial and administrative reform. Okay, so administrative reform and judicial reforms was also there. And third one was Curzon constructed canal. He constructed canal near the Jhelum river, and Chenab river and Bari river. So he constructed the canal, and Nehru constructed the Bhakra dam. So Bhakra dam was there, and the Bhakra Dam was constructed by the Jawaharlal Nehru. Okay, and other than that, Curzon recommended to set up the railway board. So railway board was also set up by the Lord Curzon. Okay, so railway board was set up by the Lord Curzon. Now, other than this, if I'm talking about the industrial development, so Lord Curzon played a great role. Curzon played a great role in the industrial development, and Nehru followed the policy for the public sector. So Nehru also followed the industrial policy. So industrial policy was also followed by the Nehru, and foreign policy is very important for the Jawaharlal Nehru. His foreign policy was very good. He attempted to against the infiltration of the Russia, France, and Germany, and Nehru gave the Panchashil. So Panchashil principles, and this principles was given by the Jawaharlal Nehru, and providing the non-interference also, and he also provided the non-interference. Okay, this was given by the Jawaharlal Nehru. Now during the partition, Lord Curzon ruled the controversial partition of Bengal, an interest of British India peaceful rule. He wanted to do the partition of Bengal because of the interest of British India, and the same had done by the Nehru regarding the partition of India Pakistan for peace and development of India. So Curzon played a great role in the Bengal partition, and same way the Jawaharlal Nehru, if I am talking about the Jawaharlal Nehru, he was done for the India and Pakistan and its partition. Okay, so both were very good in that. Second thing, thus we can find out many similarities among their nature, method of work, their rule, administration. So if there is a question about describe about the difference between the Lord Curzon and the Jawaharlal Nehru, then you can give this kind of the points in that question. Okay, now my second question is regarding how did the government of India mark a point of no return in history of constitutional development in India. So Government of India 1935 Act. You need to describe about this act and mark the points. You need to describe about the mark the points of no return in the history of constitutional development in India. Okay, so constitutional development can be traced back. If I am talking about the constitutional development, it was from 1861 Act. And if we go back, yet Regulating Act. So Regulating Act was the starting of the constitutional development in the India. So we need to, this is the second one question about the Government of India Act 1935. Okay, so what I am going to describe, first of all, we started the constitutional development in 1861 Act, and the Regulating Act, that was in 1773 Act. But the Act of the 1935, that was some important provision which were directly adopted in the Constitution of India with or without same modification. So as we know about our constitution, today our constitution is very important, and it was adopted by many points were adopted by the Government of India Act 1935. Okay, we adopted from 1935. If I am talking about some important point, first is the All India Federation. All India Federation. Okay, All India Federation. And second is all province at the time under the paramountcy of the British Crown. So British Crown was the paramount. It was in the paramount situation in that time. Okay, paramount situation. And the federal subject, assistant and advice of the Council of Ministers. So there was a federal subjects was also there, and the assistance of the Council of Minister. It was assisting these subjects. Okay, and Governor General was to administer the federal subject, and Governor General was also there. He was administrating these subjects. Okay, now next point for the Government of India Act 1935 was chosen from the responsible federal legislature. So there was some ministers, and this ministers was responsible for the legislature, legislature. Okay, so these ministers were responsible for the legislature. Okay, and other than this, there was one more thing. There was a constitutional provide for the same mechanism under the President of India and the Central Council of Ministers. Okay, so there was a federal legislature and the minister were responsible for that. And now presently, if we are discussing this mechanism, that is same as we have the President of India. and we have the Council of Minister also. Okay, now next one is Act introduced the responsible government, and it was introduced the responsible government, and there was a central province which is enact now in the constitution. Okay, so bicameral legislation, there was a bicameral legislation. Okay, bicameral legislation was there, introduced in the some provinces, and provinces were made autonomous for the respective subject, and these provinces were responsible for their respective subject. Okay, and now our states are autonomous by the authority under the constitution, and a state were autonomy in the state, so state were autonomous. The act made provision for the federal court. So another important feature of this act was the federal court, and this federal court, and that court is in the Delhi. Okay, Delhi. And now the constitution make provision for the Supreme Court. Because of that we made the Supreme Court and their provision. Okay, and which is vested with all the function of the federal court. Next is list were introduced. This provision made separation of the power, and there was the separation of powers between center and the provinces. And now our constitution provide for this list, dividing the power between center and the state, and the dividing the power between the center and the state. Okay, and now our constitution provide the three list. Okay, center and the state government. All these provisions were so important, and there was no return from them, but the constitution adopted them. So it can be said that act marked a point of no return to the history of constitutional development. So these important points are provided from the Government of India Act 1935. Now next question is our related to what was the attitude of Indian industrialist. What was the question number 3 is the what was the attitude of Indian industrialist about Indian industrialist towards the Indian National Congress in pre-independent era. What was the industrialist की क्या condition थी in pre-independent era? So if we are talking about the industrialist, then in the pre-independent era, there was a lots of industrialists grew in that time. First was the Jamnalal Bajaj, and the second was the G.D. Birla. Third was the Ambalal Sarabhai. Okay, and these are the some of them. So it is evident from the national movement, and there was some national movement, and in this movement the Congress widely boycotted the foreign goods. So what Congress done? They boycotted the foreign goods. Okay, and led to alternative to grow Indian industry, and they wanted to grow the industries which is based on the India. Okay, industries. Therefore, flourish the patriotic feeling, and they also patronize the patriotic feelings. Okay, patriotic feelings, and even joined the finance Congress. Jamnalal Bajaj remained the exchequer of Congress. Congress supported Swadeshi good. What they did? They supported the Swadeshi. They supported the Swadeshi good and Swadeshi industry. Swadeshi industries should be Swadeshi. And now power of Congress by providing with the finance and society with Swadeshi goods. So they were providing the finance to the Congress to influence the industries and to flourish the industries as Swadeshi goods. Okay, to support the program of Congress, they had their free industrial policy, and they also given the industrial policy. Okay, this was from the Congress, and without interference of British rule. And FICCI was established by 1927. So there was establishment of the FICCI, that was a Federation of Indian Industry, FICCI, and that supported the Congress directly. And though the latter Congress turned socialist to some extent, but this does not show more diversion from the patriotism, but pro-Congress attitude of Indian industrialists. So this is all about the Indian industrialist policy during the British era. Now next question is about critically assess the Sir Tej Bahadur Sapru view in Indian nationalism. So next question is about the Sir Tej Bahadur Sapru and his policy regarding the Indian nationalism. Nationalism. Okay, what is about this policy? So first is under the influence of the Gokhale, believed in constitutional mean of agitation. So he was the influence of the Gokhale. So Tej Bahadur Sapru was the influence of the Gopal Krishna Gokhale, and there was some constitutional agitation also there. So there was a constitutional agitations. Okay, so in that condition they were not in concurrence with extra constitutional method of agitation that were adopted by Congress later on. So Sapru wanted to accept the Jinnah proposal. So what was the problem? See, the Tej Bahadur Sapru, and he wanted to adopt the Jinnah proposal. What was the Jinnah proposal? Concede some more seats to him. Okay. Now, if the peace and the agreement could be procured through it, but here is failed to understand the Jinnah attitude. So Jinnah का जो attitude था, Jinnah's attitude was not that much good. That's why they failed to adopt that particular thing they wanted to do. He wanted India as a federation of the whole territorial unit. So what Sapru wanted? Sapru wanted India should be a federation. India should be a federation. He wanted India should be a federation and as a whole territorial unit. And under the British rule by the Indian Constitution, it showed the appreciable feeling of the unity to him. So he wanted to appreciate the unity in India. So he was a follower of the unity of India. Okay, and he wanted India as a federation. As a liberal leader, he favored the formation of interim government. He also favored the interim government. So second thing about the Tej Bahadur Sapru, he favored the interim government. Okay, he favored the interim government. Interim government was favored by him. And third one is he opposed the creation as a Pakistan, and he opposed the creation of Pakistan. So he was opposing this Pakistan creation. Okay, and he was with the national feeling undivided India, and he was in the national feeling for the undivided India, and he always tried to make India national movement more participatory in nature. So he was the follower of the Indian national movement as a participatory movement, and he educated people for public opinion. So he educated the peoples for the public opinions. Okay, he educated the people. His national spirit was filled up with a deep patriotism, and he was follower of the deep patriotism. So these all things about the Tej Bahadur Sapru. Okay, now next question is regarding the characterize the main feature of Indian Renaissance. So Indian Renaissance. Okay, what do you understand about the Indian Renaissance? So first, Indian Renaissance was started under the influence of British. It was under the influence of the British and the Western thinkers. Okay, it was under the influence of British and Western thinker. It was influenced by the Western thinker. It gave rise to study of the English literature. So we need to improve the English literature first. English literature, English thoughts, and English philosophies of the English, and books and history. So it was started with this all that. Okay, India past studied a new way. Now India का जो past था, we studied in a new way. So new way से क्या किया हमने? We started the study of past in the Renaissance period. Second thing we done in reinterpretation of Indian religious texts. So we started interpretation of the text okay, reinterpretation of the text, and this exposed the irregularity, malpractice should be removed, religious prevailing, so we want to improve our religious prevailings under the Raja Ram Mohan Roy. Under the Raja Ram Mohan Roy, it was started new movement which is known as the social and religious movement. Social and religious movement, social religious movement reforms, and what we started sati abolition. We started sati abolition, prevention of the child marriage, child marriage को हमने prevent किया, and we preach and the movements, we preaches the movements which is related to the different classes of Indian society look such reforms. So what kind of reforms we adopted? We influenced the political movement in India, later on peacefully adopted the political movement. So we peacefully adopted the political movement. Okay, so this all was during the Renaissance period what we did. Now this was some history के कुछ important questions थे which I wanted to discuss there. So hope this will be important for all of you.